Yeah, sorry for the half Dutch angle here, but that's the best I could position the camera in this little wooden gazebo. So, actually, to correct what I was discussing briefly in the last portion, so apparently I was wrong. Pornhub didn't didn't actually go through with buying out Vine. They put in the biggest bid for Vine, and they were going, apparently Twitter was the parent company of Vine. They were going through with beginning to transfer rights legally to MindGeek and Pornhub, but then business deals shifted and they just shut the whole thing down. And also, I was incorrect as well that Vine is, the shell of the app is not available on app stores, but you can still, the site is apparently still up, but that's what's just a shell now. There's nothing on it. So, my mistake there. And anyway, back to what I was saying. My prediction is that in the next 20 years or so, with how YouTube is pushing its way to wanting users to just go and switch to the completely private streaming service now, YouTube Premium, I'm predicting that it'll get to a point where they've destroyed this platform so vigorously that, and they have enough people willing to go and purchase that service that they're not going to go the way of Vine, but YouTube is just there's going to be a countdown date where you will no longer, you'll be able to use the app, you'll be able to use the platform, you can still view all videos uploaded prior to that date, but by that date they're just going to shut down the ability to upload to the site. I genuinely feel that's the way YouTube's going. It's going to get to a point where nobody will be able to, anyone who has employment in monetizing their content and that's how they make their living, well, then they're going to either have to retire if they can, or they're just going to, well, they'll be unemployed. They'll destroy multitude of smaller creators' livelihoods, but then they'll just say, well, unless they keep the ability to just keep gaining monetization from the already uploaded content, unless they keep in service that function for actually privatizing content that's still on the platform before or after that date, unless they do that. But if not, I'm making the guess that people will just be completely out of a career for trying to make content in relation to what they've built up with their channels on here. And so by that date, YouTube's just going to say, okay, we're shutting down our software systems for the programs to allow for further uploads after this date, because we've had enough people going to the streaming service to where we want to move ahead in the future of YouTube's furthering creator content and making it more enjoyable for all users and content creators involved. So we'll be focusing attention on premium, yada 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 yada. And they're just gonna say, by this date, here's the countdown, upload what you can while you have time, because by that count, once the clock hits zero, the entire digital system for the uploading process, it's going to be gone, and all content that isn't remove that hasn't been removed before that date it'll remain. It'll remain up on YouTube. You can still view it. You can still view every single video, every single post that's been, or every single short that has been uploaded throughout all the years. Now, let's say 30 years of YouTube. You can view all of it that was not taken down prior to that date. But after that date, you won't be able to upload to this platform anymore. It'll just literally be a social media site that it's sitting there. You can still see everything, but you can't upload to it. That's genuinely what I'm predicting that's the route YouTube's going to go in some fashion. And not just YouTube, a bunch of other major social media platforms. Maybe that'll be how it goes with Twitter or X. Elon, you really missed out on an opportunity to just call it T. You know, like your other, like your other technocratic corporation, Tesla. You know, that's infinitely more in the realms of pop culture than SpaceX. Fucking X. You could have called it T. Garner whatever amount of further populist manipulation by the falling and moderate right wing, you could have done that. But instead, you made the most ludicrous. Well, you did it on purpose, but who am I arguing with? But, and maybe once TikTok's time runs out, it'll be the same. Now, when that time comes, if it does, I guarantee that YouTube's going to try and scrub as many... It's going to try and delete as many as much video content that they deem as being, well, any content they deem as being violation of guidelines, newer guidelines, all of a sudden, right when the platform is about to go offline for uploads, which is just a subtle way of saying we're cracking down on leftist content that's still up, and we're cracking down on potentially problematic ideals being shared on the platform that is disruptive to our business rhetoric before the countdown hits 0, so that they can't and will make up bullshit excuses that when people try to file for reinstatement of their content, we're doing everything we can, the process is moving along at as quick a pace as possible, yada yada yada, and they're just gonna bide time until, for many creators, until it's too late, we can't do anything about it anymore. Anyway, I genuinely feel that that's the way that YouTube's going, and other platforms at some point in the future. But anyway, back to the topic of just taking a risk in life on dying as who you are in that moment. Dying as who you truly are. Dying as being the person that you strive to be, that you once were before all the horrific damage came flowing in. Because it really is, because your existence, it really isn't worth anything else. Everybody in this world for the longest time has just rushed. They rush to abide by methods of achieving an end goal that they think will fulfill them emotionally, that it will bring solace, that it'll be that we just need to do this for a little bit longer and then it'll be even slightly better. I can tell you from first-hand experience, it won't. It's not gonna. This fictional idea that people are concocting, especially in the modern world, that it'll be slightly better, just fine, we can abide by. I don't mind abiding by corrupt forces as long as it's just a slight bit more of an improvement for the people around me and myself, but it's not gonna be. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your time. You want it to be slightly better, then start actually, like, drop the desperation. Drop disregarding. Actually embracing genuine wants. And my generation is the worst. It really is the worst. I mean it. It is the epitome of despair. I hate Gen Z. I hate us. I'm not gonna pretend that. The people say the boomers are worse. They're the ones who caused the problem. Doesn't matter. You're the ones who perpetuate it. Like, I'm so tired of people. I see too many of the pessimistic Gen Zers who put all the blame on the older generations, like, for their depression, for their dissociation, for their laziness. Because yes, they know that all of it was built upon fabrications, that it was lies. But you make no better effort in actually, well, yeah, all of it is no better effort. For those who are these people I'm describing, they're upper political gray areas to me. They're not leftists, they're upper political gray areas. Yeah, they have some genuine leftist sentiment, but it's undermined by a whole load of complete hedonism. It's undermined by it. Your statements against the older oppressors, it makes it, it's completely undermined because you don't do anything. You know what? Okay, I hate you people more than the extremist far leftists. I hate you far more because at least they actually do something. It's not beneficial, but they try. They're convinced of ineffective methods of trying to enact liberating ideologies. Fine. Good at the very least for that. You, on the other hand, do nothing. I hate it. I can't stand to be around these people. I remember specifically at my last place of employment, there was one person, specifically, this specific person was the epitome of, well, okay, no, they weren't. Okay, if they were genuinely this, because they were a socially anxious histrionic who just manipulated people to putting on this false demeanor as if they were this quirky individual who was into progressive arts movements when it was a whole load of bullshit. That they were, fuck, I hated them. Their name began with an S and I hated them. I hated every minute being around that fucker. I hated it so much. Holy shit, I hated it being, and if they're watching this, you know exactly who you are, and if any of my former coworkers are watching this, they know exactly who I'm talking about, and oh my gosh, they were the worst person. I mean it, the worst fucking person I ever worked with in my life. I friggin' preferred the landlord who throttled me by the collar and pushed me into the snow in the middle of Appalachia. I prefer them to that. I prefer their company to that fucking person. Holy crap, I'm sorry, but I've been wanting to voice, I'm not gonna say their name, and I'm not gonna talk about them more in depth here, but this person, okay, if they were truthful, if this false persona they were adorning was actually who they were, they would have also been just as terrible a person overall. But in terms of the facade they played, they were like the epitome of what I'm talking about. And I hate it. You people who absolve yourself into your cell phones, who have this benign, quirky humor that has this underlying misanthropy to it, it's the people who I would see all the time back in high school in drama class. And I used to be friends with these types of people. I really did, because I felt as if they actually had a better understanding of corruption within humanity. But then I grew up and realized, no, you're just stuck in just this dull complaining. It's just dull complaining that does nothing. Like, you have no passion. Like, I see these people at certain intervals. I've even seen them here in Lab City at the public library. I've seen younger individuals like this mainly more of Gen Alpha. And they sit and they do nothing. And they talk about nonsense. Like, you can't even understand. The online slang that has come out of the last generation, it's just full of so much double-speak manipulation tactic and such needlessly convoluted wording. Like, it's the perfect way to describe what they call on the internet brain rot. It really is. Because you can't understand a word these people say. It's not just like, it's not a, well, it is a cultural vernacular, but it's not in the essence of just like, say, a regional vernacular where alterations have occurred through the ethnic backgrounds and various intermingling and regional landlocking of specific areas where there wasn't in the past as much contact with other linguistic traits of specific backgrounds. There wasn't as much exposure, so it created this form of language. It's not like that. It really is just a bunch of fucking horrendous means of double speak and blame shifting and gaslighting that has just turned into a fucking language that I hate hearing, that you see it everywhere online, and now you see it even in younger people. And I don't want to make this like an ageist statement of blanketing all of Gen Alpha. There are Gen Alpha who are not like this, and there are intellectuals of Gen Alpha, there are intellectuals of Gen Z, as there has been with every friggin' generation in the past. I don't want to make it sound like there's not. There's clearly going to be children who will educate themselves online, who can do what I did trying to learn about the world in better methods online. There will be. There are not going to be a lot of them, but there will be. But these people, like, forget... I know I'm using blanket terms, but just forget about that for a minute. It helps my train of thought. Like, these people who I'm referring to, they just do nothing, and they have the audacity to actually complain. You have the audacity. You don't have the fucking right to complain if you don't stand up to shit. Not in some violent manner, not even in saying something to an oppressor. If you can't even so much as walk away from something, take a risk on being put into a harsh, very painful situation, from walking away from a situation without saying even a word, you don't have the right to complain, as far as I'm concerned. Because the reality is... Okay, the reality that I've learned is that here's the reason that intelligent people, as far as I'm concerned, who I consider and I call rising leftists, that's where I consider the bulk of intelligence of the world to be, of critical thinkers who have a deep, profound understanding of humanity. There's a reason that we don't, to most people who are on our side of the spectrum, why we don't do something, why we don't get involved with more organizations that try to aid in alleviating societal problems, or to the right wing and the centrists who just demean and say that you're hypocrites because you don't do anything, supposedly. Why we don't put up our fists and fight you physically, or why we don't even say something out loud, is because we've been fucking through the ringer too much. We're the ones who see how that's not gonna work, how that's gonna just reinforce the already built up biases of you people, the ignorant morons who are aggressors. We see how it's just gonna build you up, and it's just gonna give you a very valid excuse to frame us in a negative light. And because in that, as well as that, it's our own trauma. I can't fight someone if I tried. I can't. I don't want to. I'm not going to pretend like I do. I've said this before. A while back I've said this, very briefly, but I really want to hone in that point. When I get to the point of feeling like, and I see a scenario of extreme abuse, especially in regards to demeaning children, a scenario that through my studies I know is going to cause them trauma, I want to say something. But I'm constantly trying to figure out in my mind, what am I going to say? What actually am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to stand up in the middle of a busy cafe? I'm going to start hounding these idiot parents right here, right now? What if one of them decides, especially in a very conservative area, what if one of them decides to throw a punch at me? Fine, I get hit. I'm willing to take that in certain regards, if I'm really pushed that far. And what am I going to do when the actual most of the cafe residents start being on the parents' side? What am I going to do then? Huh? What am I going to do when the police come, they're all on the side of the fucking rancid community that I'm in? What am I going to do then? What are you going to do then? All of you who claim that you would stand up in all these scenarios, or that you're so good at recognizing injustice when you're really not. I can point out so many far leftists, people who claim to be far leftists, they sit in scenarios right in their surroundings. They're fucking oblivious to actual, more in-depth trauma. Because they really don't have as in-depth an understanding of psychology. They're really oblivious to it. What are you going to do then, though? What are you going to do then? When the entire environment, when you try and stand up, now is threateningly against you. What then? And when that happens to me, and it gets to a point where I think I'm gonna do something, I start shaking into it. I start to get to an anxious reaction. An anxious cortisol-induced amygdala reaction. My parasympathetic nervous system, it starts going. Because I've been in this scenario before when I was a child. People don't realize how trauma really does stun you in multiple various forms, no matter what disorder it is, especially so in PTSD. That's one where it's very prevalent how specific triggers in environmental factors stuns someone right then and there. You can mitigate all of these. The reality is, you can only mitigate them so much at certain points. There's only so much that someone who wants to remain, as far as I'm concerned, morally sound can do. I don't engage in violent action because I know that it's an immoral practice that in most scenarios does not work. Most. You can make the case for the rare few. Fine. That's those rare few instances. That's not most. And in those rare few, it's a short bout. I don't even count that as violence, actually. I've said this before as well. I don't count that as actual true violence. Where, okay, if there's an abuser who is getting physically domineering right there with you, and you throw one punch at them, and it actually stuns them, and that gets enough to where they actually have a shift in perception where, oh shit, this person actually did do something. I never expected that reaction because I've never gotten it before. And now they're stunned to actually do something further. You don't need multiple blows. It's just that one. And then it all just kind of subsides. There are multiple accounts like this. Where one bit of physical aggression ensues, and then it all just kind of like, it all just starts lessening, at least to abuse that is more verbal and not physical. At least as far as I've seen. That's one instance where a display of empathic, you call it physical aggression, trying to get your oppressor in that immediate moment to understand you, to subconsciously trying to get your needs met, to display this suffering that's being inflicted towards you. Fine. But most scenarios, it doesn't escalate like that. Most people, most demographics of the world, as far as I'm concerned, just go around silently hating each other. It's all just through that subtle alienation of one another. It's just this silent demeaning. And for an empath, we can't engage with the world in some brutish manner. We can't. It is fundamentally damaging to our physiological process, to our whole bodily structure. For empaths, it is dangerous for us to engage in aggression and violence. It is very dangerous. We can't handle it. We can't at all. We don't have the emotional, we certainly do not have the emotional devoidness to engage with other human beings like that. And it's especially dangerous as well, though, why so many empaths have major depressive disorder is because we see all the extreme horrors around us of people. We know more about how those people psychologically function than they do themselves. They're completely oblivious to their own selves, yet the other can completely perceive them in almost in well enough accurate sense for how we relate our constructs to the world. And it is dangerous for us it is damaging for empaths to see other members of their animal species. So that's what we are, Homo sapiens. It is dangerous for us to see animals that look like us, that sound like us, that smell like us, that enjoy similar things to us, that exonerates on an exterior level everything that is us, but internally being so far away from what we know, being so far away from us. Internally, just being so far removed from the truthful psychobiology of their own species. It's damaging. It's painful. It hurts. In high amounts, it'll cause bits of how depression manifests neurologically, cause atrophy for the time being of the frontal cortex and of our hippocampi, cause mass overreactions of stress hormones. It causes extreme conscious fear. It's fundamentally dangerous. It's so dangerous. It's why I don't socialize. And the moronic medical systems will believe or be taught under the guise in medical education as it's one of the worst forms of purposely stupefied institutional education of the world, that these disorders come about because of non-conformity to the common practices of society. That's completely wrong. The disorders are because of the conformity. It is not because of going away from it. Like, if I was to be assessed by a dismissive regulatory hospital psychiatrist, they'd most likely diagnose me with low-grade antisocial personality disorder. Or maybe they diagnose me with schizoid personality disorder. I don't fit either of those. As when you get to know me, because fundamentally, one, I don't have an uncomfortability to human beings in the slightest. And I do not purposely detach myself overall. I don't purposely go away from forming strengthened, intimate interpersonal relationships, but want human beings still to be in some contact or admiration of me. I don't do that. So that'd be an incorrect assessment. I don't socialize because I know that in most communal settings, it will not get me anywhere. here's another thing. Oh, and I'm going to address this before the video ends. Some corrections I need to make as of information that I was incorrect about. But also, I'm going to address two specific commenters. One who I meant to address a while back, didn't get around to it, finally am. And another who commented on my channel recently, who is a blithering idiot overall, and I'm fed up with seeing these. I'm fed up with seeing these people in my comments. So I'm just going to address them as quickly as possible and correct information that I was wrong about recently, and then move on. But in regards to confidence in some manner of actually gaining confident personality traits, finally actually having more levels of self-assuredness, how do I now, especially, how do I keep myself in a state of composure, I guess? How do I stay confident in what I'm saying, even if everything is uncertain, even when I've been proven wrong in the past? You learn that every single human being on this planet will be wrong in terms of information they have received, they have learnt in some manner or another. In certain people in lesser forms, they will be less incorrect than others. Certain people will be more incorrect than others. Every single person, no matter how intelligent they are, will be wrong in some minor manner on something, and they will have to correct their knowledge. Or they will die before they get the chance to correct their opinions. And their legacy will be met with this one bit of unintentional misunderstanding. You learn that. That does not mean, people think, and I see this too often, those who gain severe social anxiety, who think that in order to, or higher avoidance traits, that they need to maintain this really shy and closed off, like, just this, oh, well, I guess, I don't know. Well, maybe it's right, but I guess, what do I know? I'm not entirely sure of these things. They don't, like, that you have to remain in this, you have to repress your confidence in order to dissuade harming others by setting up an untruthful notion. Even if in that moment, you, from what information you've received, you believe it to be truthful. No, it's not. It's not at all a solution to it. Confidence is not narcissistic personality disorder. I'm sorry to tell all the narcissists out there who believe that. I'm sorry to tell you that. Who believe that any confidence from another person that isn't overconfidence, that isn't this complete array of insecurity, I'm sorry to tell you, but, well, you're wrong in that notion. You really are. Confidence is being assured in what you've learned at that moment, discussing it as so, but also having the ability to admit when you're wrong in a confident manner. That's what it is. I learned that, especially in regards to when I was so much more, at the beginning of this channel, so much more sporadic in my thought patterns and my speech patterns. When I would go from one point to another within the same, when I was talking within the same, when I hadn't even finished, when I hadn't even come close to fully finishing one thought, because I was so obsessed with the innate paradoxical nature of life. Like, I wanted to mitigate, I tried to find desperately ways of mitigating surface level contradictions in my own speech as much as possible. And that was inflamed from people who I should not have been friends with. That was inflamed by narcissists who I knew, people who I suspected of being who were way too self-assured, who were very clearly insecure of their own intelligence, and I felt so I clearly, subconsciously felt so compelled to just make sure of no misinterpretation. Well, the reality is, people will misinterpret what others say, even in a benevolent way, not inherently in any sort of, not any angered way. There are people who will misinterpret things in an unproblematic sense. And it's so exhausting. So fucking exhausting. Just, that's another way I live how I do, knowing that I will be wrong. And if I can, I will make corrections about what I was wrong on, misled on, was misinformed about through my own research, through my own social observations, what I'd come across that was misinformation. That I had made a wrong conclusion of. We made a short recently in some regard that related to this in regards to misinformation being abusive. Okay, let me be more specific. Purposeful misinformation is abusive. Sorry, it's just the temperature is cold right now. I don't really have any other place to film this little bit of ranting at the moment. Actually, hold on. Yes, I do. Yeah, I actually do.